Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the first of two videos talking about Al-Isti'atha and Basmalah, their requirements, their rulings, when we read them, and how do we combine between Isti'atha and Basmalah, or between a surah and the other surah when there's Basmalah in between. So Bismillah, let's start. First, we will start with Al-Isti'atha, and that is saying A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. And we go to the ayah in Surah An-Nahl where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. Translated as, if you read the Quran, seek refuge from the shaitan. Now from that ayah we take that the Isti'atha is required and is necessary before we commence reciting the Quran. I.e., we must make Isti'atha before we start reading the Quran as per the ayah. And that applies for wherever we start when reading the Quran. So if we start from the beginning of a surah, we will make Isti'atha. And if we start from anywhere within the surah, from the middle of the surah for example, we are still required to make Isti'atha. So wherever we start within a surah, or wherever we start for a recitation, we say A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim, and that is the form that is preferred as per the ayah where it says Fasta'idh billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Now let's talk about some practical aspects that apply to Isti'atha, and I'll talk to 6 points Insha'Allah. First, if I'm reading silently, or if I'm intending to read silently, I would read Isti'atha silently. Second point is, if I'm going to read out loud, I would read Isti'atha out loud. Third point is, if I'm in prayer, I would read Isti'atha silently, even if it's a Jahriya Salah or a Sirriya Salah. So in Dhuhr, which is Sirriya, I would read Isti'atha silently. And if it's Maghrib and I'm the Imam, I would still read Isti'atha silently. The fourth point is, which is very applicable to us Insha'Allah in the classrooms, is if we have a halaqah or a circle or a group where we want to read the Quran one ayah at a time, for example, the first person in the group reads Isti'atha out loud. The first person reads Isti'atha out loud. The second person and the third person and the fourth person read it silently when it comes to their turn. So when the first person reads it out loud and he starts reciting out loud, and then the turn comes to my turn and I'm the second in line, I would make Isti'atha silently and then continue to read the next ayah out loud. The fifth point and sixth point are about interruptions. So if in the halaqah we're interrupted, so an interruption in terms of if we stop to discuss the tafsir or Tajweed or something around that, we don't have to repeat Isti'atha. However, if I'm reading and I'm interrupted with a phone call and someone chats to me for 5 minutes and 10 minutes and about something completely different than the Quran, then when I come back to read the Quran, it's necessary to make Isti'atha again. Going back to the meaning of Isti'atha, it's saying, Ya Allah, I ask you refuge from the shaitan before I commence reading the Quran. So it's purifying your niyyah and asking Allah for His assistance. Now let's move on to Basmalah, and that is saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Basmalah is much simpler. At the start of every surah, we have to say Basmalah, with one exception, which is Surah At-Tawbah. So with the start of every surah, we read the Basmalah and say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now if I'm reading from the middle of a surah or any other place other than the start, I'm not required to make Basmalah. It's optional. So I could say it and I might not say it. But the requirement to say Basmalah is at the beginning of every surah. Anywhere else, if you read in the middle, you read from the second ayah or the last ayah, Basmalah is optional. So let's summarize once again. Isti'atha is necessary wherever or whenever we start reciting, and from wherever we start, from the beginning of a surah or from the second ayah or from the middle, we always have to make Isti'atha. Basmalah, on the other hand, saying Bismillah, is required at the beginning of a surah, but is optional anywhere else. So if I start from the middle of a surah, for example, I have to make Isti'atha, but I have the option to make Basmalah or not. That's a quick summary to Isti'atha and Basmalah, and we'll meet you in the next video where we talk about how to combine Isti'atha and Basmalah with the first surah, and how to combine the surah with Basmalah in the middle. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.